All right, everyone, welcome back. Today I have to warn you guys, I don't have my microphone if I sound weird at all, but I think it's going to be okay. I'm recording at my parents' house and yeah, we're gonna make the most of it. So today I have Lindsey Dorka with me. We are going to be chatting more about stress and trauma and emotions and all of that fun stuff. So welcome to ICU, Lindsey.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Do you want to take a second to introduce yourself to the listeners?
Sure. So, like Callie said, I'm Lindsay. I have a background as an occupational therapist. So, I've worked in healthcare for, over 10 years now, but currently practicing as a women's stress management and mindset coach. So, really just helping you get out of feeling overwhelmed and anxious all the time. And I believe that this doesn't have to be super time consuming or challenging. It can be a simple process to help you do that.
Mm-hmm. And you and I were chatting before we hit the record button about how you kind of got into the what you're currently doing. So can you explain to the listeners how you got into being the oh my God, I already forgot the title that you literally just said.
The stress coach.
That. Can you explain how you went from regular occupational therapist to that?
Yeah, so the big transition came from I've been practicing as a pelvic floor occupational therapist for several years. And I was finding with a lot of my clients, specifically my pain clients, but honestly, any of my clients, that stress was a huge root cause for a lot of their symptoms. One of the big catalysts, actually, quick little side, note here. One of my clients was dealing with like urinary incontinence and constipation and prolapse symptoms, and she looked at me and was like, "I'm not going to do any physical exercises." And I was like, "Cool. How am I going to help you?" And so, for those of you that don't know, as an occupational therapist, we have a pretty heavy psychological background in our education. So I utilized a lot of those skills, and we mainly worked on nervous system regulation, her mindset, her stress management, and all of her symptoms went away. And I was like, light bulb moment. This is huge. So yeah, that's kind of how I started transitioning into this, because I just knew I could help even more women focusing on this as opposed to just pelvic health.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I was saying to you earlier, I don't know anybody who's doing what you do. So that's honestly so amazing for you. And I feel like you have that client to, or that patient to thank for giving you that
Absolutely.
moment.
Yes, 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 absolutely.
All right. So where should we start in our conversation? So do you have any thoughts on where to begin, or would you like me to just start hitting you with some questions?
Yeah, I think maybe a good place to start are like, what are really common signs of chronic stress? Because I think in today's world, a majority of us are chronically stressed, but it's become our normal to the point that we don't realize how stressed we are,
Oh,
right? So I'm going to go through like three different categories. So a lot of the physical signs of stress, I feel like often go, I don't know that I want to say ignored, but we go to the doctor and we get medication for these things, or we seek other types of treatment, when in reality, if we really looked at our stress, it could help so much. So, chronic pain is a huge indicator. This includes obviously any sort of pelvic pain, headaches, TMJ, low back pain, the whole gamut. Any sort of sleep issues, gut issues, constipation, IBS, even skin things like acne, rosacea, rashes, um, fertility issues, period problems, any thyroid issues, High blood pressure is also a really common sign. If you are one of those people, especially this time of year, who gets every single cold imaginable, that's also a common sign of chronic stress. And then we go to another category, right? So kind of all of these emotional signs. So if you're someone that's really constantly feeling tense or on edge, maybe you have a short temper, you snap at people super easily. If you have difficulty relaxing or you feel like really restless, even things like brain fog, forgetfulness, difficulty concentrating, those are all signs that, again, you're under some chronic stress.
Lindsay, stop talking about me. Oh my God. I'm like checking off everything that you're saying.
Like, ding,
Short
ding, ding.
fuse, like all of that stuff.
Yeah.
100%. And it took me a while to realize that these were signs of chronic stress. And I
Mhm.
don't even know what it was. It was probably like a TikTok or an Instagram reel that I saw where someone that is similar to you and what you do was just saying like these are the signs. And I was like,
Yeah,
holy crap, like
this is me.
this is
And
me.
I was this person too. Like, that's honestly, yes, I have professional experience doing this, but I've been this person. And it was, greatly impacting not only my physical health, but my mental well-being and my relationships, right? So, yeah, I think then finally some of the behavioral things that we do in response to this. So, if you have a lot of cravings, um, procrastination, people pleasing, perfectionism, if you need caffeine to get through your day, if you need a substance to unwind, right? I think especially on social media, like I'm a mom, so you always see that like mommy needs a glass of wine, right? At the end of every night. And it's like, ha ha, but also like that's actually an issue. Like you shouldn't need a glass of wine to unwind. So yeah, things like that. Constantly being busy. If you feel like you have to be busy, that's a problem. We need to do something about that.
Yeah. I think, and one thing that you said that I see a lot of is perfectionism. Like
Yes.
we were doing a group coaching call a couple weeks ago for my Road to Remission program. And I asked everybody, raise your hand if you consider yourself a perfectionist. And like all 10 people that were there were raising their hands. And I'm like, there has got to be something to this. Like,
100%. Yes, 100%. 100%. And a lot of times perfectionism is, I mean, it's multifactorial, but some of it is just we grew up around perfectionists, right? And so it's just kind of this learned innate behavior. Some of it is a coping mechanism, right? To give ourselves a sense of more control when we don't actually have control. But yeah, that rigidity that comes with it, that self-criticism that comes with it creates a lot of internal stress, which is not good for our body. And like for your clients who have IC, it's absolutely not a good thing.
yeah. And my I used to see a sex therapist and she suggested that I do what was it called? It was some perfectionist workbook. And
Mhm.
I was like, that sounds kind of lame, but I did it and it was so eye-opening. They had like, check off all of the characteristics that you have. And like if it's this many out of 50, you are very much a perfectionist. Like, wow, I
Cool.
checking everything. Great. And then I was like to my boyfriend, please do this list and I want to see where you're at.
Yeah.
No way. Uh, but yeah, so helpful. So if anybody's listening that is feeling like a perfectionist, I would highly suggest looking into a workbook like that because it was really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes, I mean, for anything, especially with like mindset and stress management, awareness is the first step. Truthfully, like you have to become aware of the fact that you're doing things that maybe are not desirable and that you do have the power to change them.
Totally. So what happens in your body when you're stressed?
Oh, that's a great question. So lots of things happen in your body when you're stressed. But, so essentially, I also want to throw this out there, right? Stress is not a bad thing. Stress is a survival mechanism. You hear the words fight or flight, like stress helps us survive. It helps us overcome something. It's chronic stress that becomes a problem, right? So a lot of times when we think about stress, we think about cortisol, which is an essential hormone, but it's our stress hormone. And so when things are working optimally and we are not under chronic stress, right? That cortisol is doing things like supporting our metabolism. It is actually helping our brain function. So it improves our ability to focus and make memories. It manages levels of inflammation in our body. It's a big regulator for our sleep and wake cycles. And, again, it is the thing that helps to mobilize our system so that we can flee from danger or, survive a big disaster. It's when those cortisol levels become too high in the body, that bad things start to happen, right? All of those signs of chronic stress that I just mentioned, all of those things start to show up. And then, people have probably heard of adrenal fatigue. I know there's like disputes out there on whether or not that's a real thing, but essentially what can happen is when your cortisol levels have been so high for so long that then they can actually become depleted. And so then you can have too low levels of cortisol, and that creates a lot of similar problems, but some other differing problems as well.
Mm-hmm. And where does trauma tie into all of this?
Yeah, so trauma, essentially, especially when it's trauma that hasn't been processed or trauma that is stuck, right? I don't think you can go through life without experiencing some sort of trauma. Some people are more resilient to the trauma, and some of that is, they're able to process the trauma and let it work through your system. But that more repressed trauma or trauma that is stuck is contributing to those cortisol levels because it's basically just keeping your body in this constant survival state.
Yeah. And we've talked about like big T trauma and little T trauma on this podcast before.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I do think that, we've all, like you said, we all have it. Some of us have worked through it, but the majority of us, I feel like, just don't. And then those emotions just get suppressed.
Yes. Yes. And, I think what people don't think about either is like a lot of our trauma we've had zero control over, right? Trauma could happen from our childbirth. And then there's the concept of generational trauma. We don't have to go down that entire rabbit hole, but I think too, especially I feel like the generations before us haven't done a great job of teaching us how to positively express our emotions and feel our feelings. So we have grown up just suppressing them and pushing them down and trying to distract ourselves and numb ourselves to them. And it's wreaking havoc on our physical and mental health.
1000% I agree with you. My parents, like, I can tell that they have a lot of suppressed emotions and stuff that they did not work through. And I'm like, hey, why don't you guys go to therapy? And they're like, no, we're not doing that. And I'm like, okay, to yourself. Cool. Like, I go to therapy and I feel great. So I'm going to break that, trend, and we're going to make it better for the next generation.
Right. Well, and I think want to preface this by saying I love therapy. I think therapy is amazing. I've done a lot of my own therapy. There are different qualities of therapists, right? But sometimes talk therapy is not enough when it comes to kind of processing those suppressed emotions. Sometimes actually talking about it can like be very triggering. I worked with a lot of clients who were like, I didn't find any relief with my therapy. And when we've stepped back and taken different approaches, they're like, oh,
Yeah.
like this was more what I needed. And then they're in a better space to actually then be able to talk about it.
Okay. What kind of approaches are you referring to? I'm curious.
Yeah, so I like to do a lot of like more somatic based approaches. But also I think that people need to realize that if you're in a state of stress, if you're in a state of fight, flight, or freeze, um, your brain, like your higher level brain functions are not online super well. And so it's really hard to actually process or retrain your brain when you're in those states. So a lot of times I'm just helping my clients with some basic nervous system regulation and lifestyle changes to help, let's get you out of that state for periods of time. So then you can kind of do the higher level thinking work when you're in more of that like nervous system regulated state, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it made me think of one of my clients yesterday was talking about how she just started up in therapy. And she said how her therapist has her working through a lot of her like childhood trauma, but
Hmm.
she feels like it's not helping her with her IC pain. And she's like, I don't know if I should ask for different ways to cope with this pain that I'm feeling in the present moment. And I was like, that's a great question. I don't have the answer, but I would bring that up with your therapist. So I would love to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think a lot of times that is a missing piece in therapy. Again, it depends on the therapist training, right? Like, because I don't want to say this is a blanket statement about therapy, but a lot of times they're trying to just have you talk through prior traumas or current, traumas or stressors, but they're not giving you the coping skills to manage them in the moment. And that's a lot of what I do is helping you feel safe in the moment when things are going a little bit awry, essentially.
Yeah. I'm sure that's really helpful to just
Mhm.
have things that you can do, like tools in your toolbox, like we like to say. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so I'm kind of curious as to like with someone listening to this who is thinking, maybe I'm stressed, but I'm not sure. Like, am I stuck in a state of chronic stress? Like, how can someone like that be more aware of their potential stress? Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. So I definitely think like you need to really take stock of like what is happening in your body, right? Again, I think so many of those physical symptoms I mentioned earlier are considered normal, normal experiences. Like, oh, you're tired. Cool. Like, oh, you need all this caffeine to make it through your day. So does everyone else. Um, but like recognize that while those things may be super, super common, they're not, I hate the word saying normal, but they're not ideal. They're not optimal. That doesn't mean your system is functioning in an ideal state, right? So I definitely think like tuning into what's happening in your body, like, are you pooping every day? Right? Like super
Great
simple.
question.
Because if you think like fight or flight, the opposite is rest and digest. So if you have any sort of digestive issues, really big sign that like you're probably in a state of chronic fight or flight. Um, do you get a lot of headaches? I think that's also often just like, man, that's normal. Like people get headaches. Let's pop some Advil or Aleve. Um, how tired are you? Are you getting enough sleep? Do you feel like you can sit on the couch? I like this one. Can you sit quietly with no stimulation
I
for a few
can't.
minutes?
I can't
Yes.
do that. Nope.
Yeah. And that's a problem. And some of it is because we've become addicted to our cortisol. Like we've become addicted to the stress hormones. Um, and then you hear things like, well, you need to meditate for 30 minutes a day. And you're like, absolutely not. Like, I can't sit still for 2 minutes, right? Um, and so that's why, like, one of the big things I work on with my clients is like, we start really small and really slow, and we work on like, you have to relearn how to tolerate being in the moment with yourself with nothing else to do. But you can't go from like 0 to 100, right? I've got one client right now. I was like, your meditation goal, and it's not even like true meditation, but just like your mindfulness goal is like 90 seconds.
Mhm.
She's like, that's it? Like, yeah. And it's gonna probably be hard.
Yeah. Baby steps.
Yeah, baby steps. And like that's the way though to start seeing progress. And then when you start getting more and more of it, you start to crave those feelings of calm. But we
Mhm.
have to do it in a way that doesn't feel threatening to you, because then you
Right.
won't do it.
Can we tie this into interstitial cystitis and like pelvic pain?
Sure.
So I'm thinking, is there any research that you know of that ties stress or examines like the effect of stress on pelvic pain or urinary symptoms?
Um, I'm sure there are, like, I can't think of any studies off of the top of my head.
Me too. I know that there are.
I
Just don't.
know that there are, yeah. But off the top of my head, I cannot name them. But I will say this, like in my clinical experience, and just knowing what I know about stress. So, like, especially with urinary symptoms, right? So, that's another form of digestion, essentially, right? So, when you are in chronic stress, like it's not functioning as well. Um, and then when pain becomes chronic, like with IC, that in itself is like a stressor,
Mhm.
right? So it's like it's this cycle, like getting the pain is a stress. How you respond to the pain might be another added stress. So you have to work yourself out of that cycle to really help your
Right.
pain be better managed.
Yeah. And we were just talking about being more aware of your stress. And I I notice that a lot of my clients have dysregulated nervous systems. And what I have them do is, if it's not more stressful for them, to try to just take a couple moments throughout the day and just feel where you're at on a scale of 1 to 10. Like, how anxious, how stressed do you feel right now? And then also keep track of their bladder symptoms. So, the pain that you're feeling, or how big of an urge you had to go, or anything of that nature, so that once you have that data on pen and on paper, you can identify patterns, because people
Yeah.
aren't really realizing how much of an impact stress and anxiety can have on their symptoms. And then once you see it, it's like, oh, yeah, it wasn't that food that I ate. It was actually the really stressful day I had at work yesterday.
Exactly, exactly. And to kind of go along with that, like, this might be a totally new way of thinking about stress, but I think a lot of times what we think is causing our stress is not actually the true cause of our stress, right? So a lot of times, we're like, oh, it's my job, it's a relationship stress, it's finances, it's my health, right? It's like all the 100,000 things on my to-do list. But it's really not those. It's actually more internal, right? It's what are your limiting beliefs, right? What do you have a lack of boundaries? Do you have zero time management skills? Do you avoid your feelings? What is your self-talk like? Like, what is your internal mental state? That is a huge one. Um, and like, are you attempting to control things that are like 100% outside of your control, right? All of those things are going to play into the first list that I said. But that's why so many people, I feel like, try to, they get a new job, right? They're like, this will fix my stress, but then they're in the same boat 6 months, a year later, because no, it's actually other things that you needed to really fix or address or work on. Yeah.
Yeah, that negative self-talk is so true. And it's really hard for people to stop doing that, to stop that habit.
It is.
Because I mean, and going off of that, just thoughts of like, I'm never gonna get better. There's no hope for me. And people are like scrolling on Facebook support groups, I call it doom scrolling, because
Oh,
most of
yes.
it is negative. If it's not like outright negative, it makes you feel negative, even if
100%.
that wasn't the intention of the post. And so
Hmm.
people just get stuck in this really, really negative and like hopeless headspace. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just speaking in the IC community. That's what I have seen.
Hmm. Yeah. And what I want them to know, and you may have already like said this to them in various capacities, right? Is that your thoughts actually create your reality.
Mhm.
So it's the people that are way more negative and who are thinking, I'm never going to get better, right? If those are your constant thoughts, you're going to take actions that are going to support those thoughts. And then that's going to perpetuate you not getting better. And yeah, I'm not saying it's like the easiest thing in the world to just become the automatic opposite, right? And that's where you have to do baby steps. Like we need to, what's one step more positive of a thought, right? Like we can't just automatically go from I'm never going to get better to like I'm 100% going to get better. Like that's not believable. And when it's not believable, you're not going to change your thoughts.
Right. Yeah, I've definitely had to work on that myself, and I honestly, a lot of the time I was just faking it. Fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
I started to believe it. I was like, "Okay, cool," because before I didn't believe this, so this is
Right.
obviously working.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, like you said, sometimes it is like fake it till you make it. And I also want to acknowledge, like, want you to think about, I think sometimes it's easy for us to get super frustrated when we've tried it for a few days and we're like, it's not better. It's like, honey, you've had this negative thought for, I mean, potentially years, like maybe decades, right? Like you're not going to see changes in 24 to 48 hours. It takes a lot of repetition. Um, and yeah, that can be annoying, but it's absolutely worth it.
Yeah, totally. And I do want to tell people, if you are doom scrolling and it's making you feel in a negative way, take a break.
Yeah.
I had clients who just are, I don't want to say addicted to it, but like they hyper fixate on what people are saying in these groups.
Hmm.
It can sometimes make you feel inadequate. You can start to compare yourself to other people. And the thing about IC is we're all so different. There isn't one approach that works for everybody. And
Right.
so you kind of have to stay in your own lane. And if you're
Hmm.
not in a healthy mind or healthy mental space, like you can fall into this like black hole of negativity and feeling hopeless and seeing other people not getting relief and thinking, oh, that's going to be me. And then, you start all those negative thoughts.
Right.
It's not a good place to be, especially if I would say more so in the beginning after your diagnosis, like you're going through so many feelings. And I absolutely think it's valid to throw yourself a pity party, but like for
100%.
X amount of time. You don't want that to continue on forever. You have to realize that this condition I see and pelvic pain, like maybe there's no cure right now, but you can manage your symptoms, and a lot
Mhm.
of people are reaching remission. They're completely getting rid of their symptoms. So it's like you have to kind of think about that and consider that, especially when you're seeing all of this. So I would say back to the point I was going to make was get off of these groups if they're not serving you. Maybe take a 1 week break. I have a client who she was Googling things. She was like one of those people who just Googles everything. And I'm like that too. But whenever she had a question, she would send it to her mom to Google so that she didn't get stuck in like that whole, you know
I
what I'm
like
saying?
that.
It's like,
Yeah, like you're removing yourself from the situation in one way. Yeah,
well, I mean, because then you Google one thing and then you see something and then you click and then you're just on
right.
this
Yeah,
endless.
it's this downward spiral.
Yeah.
Well, and so something that I love to, because some of my clients have, not necessarily a condition like I see, but they just have health anxiety in general. So any little symptom that pops up, they're like, oh, what does that mean? Like, right. And then they think they're dying. Um, and so one thing I like to tell my clients is like, can we reframe? Like, instead of immediately jumping to like, oh, there's this physical problem, like, can you ask yourself from an emotional standpoint, what is my body telling me I need right now? Because a lot of times our physical symptoms are a manifestation of what is happening emotionally. It's just our body's way of trying to get our attention about something. And they're going to get louder if we ignore it and just keep focusing only on the physical stuff. Like, how do I fix the physical stuff, right? So how can we address the emotional component too?
Mhm. Yeah. That it's a lot of people will just jump from procedure to medication to supplement, thinking like this is going to be the thing that fixes me. But a
Mhm.
lot of the time, we're just ignoring our mental health and
Yeah.
everything that's internal. And I have to admit, I was stuck in that state of mind for a really long time. I was just hoping that there would be some sort of procedure or medication that would like essentially cure me,
Yeah.
like a quick fix. And nothing ended up doing that until I started to look at my nervous system and what was going on there. And
Mm,
working with my pelvic floor physical therapist, because when I get stressed, I hold that stress in my pelvic floor and that can trigger a flare up. And
yeah.
I think that happens to a lot of us. We start to hold that tension in the pelvic floor. Do you see a lot of that?
Absolutely. 100%. And throw this out there too. Like, I have a history of chronic pain. So it was not IC, but I dealt with chronic SI joint pain for 7 years. So I understand. I had pain every single day and I did all of the physical things. I mean, I did everything right. Nothing helped. Until I looked at it more from a mental health perspective. And then everything changed and I don't deal with it anymore.
Yeah. So, I mean, the main takeaway here, I feel like, is if you are suffering from bladder symptoms or pelvic pain and every intervention you've tried so far, things that we've mentioned aren't working, aren't getting you relief, maybe consider the fact that it could be something with your nervous system or your mindset or everything that we've been talking about. Just consider it.
Yeah. And I want you to hear too that like that does not mean your pain is in your head and that it's not real, right? I think there are sometimes like well-meaning practitioners who can be like, we're not finding anything physical. So like this, they say this is in your head. And like, that's
When
the
they
worst.
say that, they usually point to their head.
I know. And it's the
Wait for
worst
that
way to say
visual.
that. It like, that's not going to help anyone. Right. But what I want you to know is that your emotions, especially if you suppress them, create physiologic changes in your body, right? So it can actually change your tissue. It can change your muscle tension. So it can create a physical problem that isn't necessarily identifiable from, other exams and testing. But those things can change super easily when you start to do the inner work.
Yeah. I think that's a really great point. Is there anything else that you wanted to dive into, or any last, things you wanted to say to the audience before we wrap this up?
Well, I know one thing you had mentioned earlier was kind of talking about like suppressing your emotions. So I guess like, did you have any questions for me about emotional suppression?
Mm. Man, a lot of emotional suppression from girl right here. I mean, I feel like we've probably talked a little bit about it, but like what happens when you suppress your emotions? Like what happens when you don't process them? Is that what that means?
Yeah, essentially. And so all emotions like are meant to be felt, right? Like we are emotional beings. Um, I think society, for a lack of a better word, right, kind of dictates that like the negative emotions are things that we shouldn't be feeling, right? Like anger, sadness, grief, right? All of those. Um, but we're designed to feel them. And when we suppress an emotion, one, it takes a lot of energy in our body to keep them down. So it can be really fatiguing. Um, Two, though, it creates internal stress and internal tension and emotions, not to get like woo woo or anything, but we all vibrate at various energy frequencies and our emotions do the same thing. And when we don't release them, they can go into different parts of our body and essentially stay stuck there until we work through them. And I think what happens is we get too in our head with our emotions. So we focus on all of the thoughts surrounding them, when what we really need to focus on are the actual sensations, the physical sensations that are related to them. So research shows that an emotion in the physical sense lasts for only about 90 seconds. But for us, they last way longer. We perpetuate them with the rumination over them, the thoughts that we have about them, right? So if we could just tune into letting ourselves feel those sensations and be with them and maybe do a somatic practice to release them, they're going to be gone way sooner. And then we will feel okay about them. We often will have a lot more clarity around whether or not there's an action we need to take. I call this surrendering, surrendering to your feelings.
Yeah. Feel your dang feelings, people.
Yes. And this can it can feel scary to feel your feelings, right? So I often don't recommend trying this with something that is super traumatic at first, unless you're like working with someone that can help guide you through that. But if you're feeling irritated, like that you're stuck in traffic, can you just tune inward? It's a mindfulness practice, right? Like, where do you feel it? What sensations are coming up? Is it tightness in your chest? Like, is it tension? Like, where do you feel it? And especially for anyone with chronic pain, like IC or pelvic pain, like you're going to start to notice patterns of like, oh, I feel anger and it's showing up as pelvic tension. Interesting. So then, that can help us be like, okay, so we need to work on some anger processing and helping you with some practices to release your anger in more beneficial ways.
Mhm. Yeah. Amazing. I love all of that. And I'm glad you brought that up because it was definitely, it needs to be said. I don't think we hear this type of thing enough.
Yeah, I agree.
Amazing. Okay, so um for anybody that is interested in learning more about what you do, can you kind of talk about what you're currently offering? Are you taking new clients? What's going
Yeah.
on?
Yeah. So I currently am just doing one-to-one coaching. It's a 4-month program. I do have different levels of support within that. And yes, I'm accepting new clients. I love working with people. Uh, and I think the big thing, I think Callie, we were talking about this before we started recording, is that it can feel really daunting, like to think about managing your stress. And I think a lot of that is just the way that stress management is often presented to us. It feels like it's hard and it's time consuming, and it doesn't have to be that way. So really, what I'm doing with you is helping you figure out, one, what is truly the causes of your stress, and how can we seamlessly implement tools and practices into your life in an easy and simple way so that it's sustainable and you can have that resilience.
Mhm.
Makes sense.
Awesome.
But on Instagram, that's where I'm most active. You can find me at wellbeing underscore with underscore Lindsey. Um, will you put that in the show notes?
Yes, ma'am.
That way I don't have to spell it all out.
You didn't make it easy on yourself.
I really didn't. No, yeah, it's not one of my strong suits.
Yeah, I'll link all of that. I just want to say thank you so much for your time. Thanks for coming on and talking about this.
Oh, thank you for having
Hope
me.
I hope that my audience isn't getting sick of this topic, but I said earlier, like this is what I'm seeing my clients struggle with the most.
Mm,
And so I want to raise awareness for this because it could help somebody. And, yeah, just thank you for being here.
of course, I appreciate it.